Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the HLAA webinar. We're going to get started here in just a second as folks are coming in. We're going to give folks just a couple more seconds to get in here. Right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen here with you guys. Welcome to today's HLAA Showcase webinar. It's addressing the #1 issue in hearing aids, hearing, sound, and noise, presented by ReSound with Jen Shoemaker. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Cruz, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm going to start off by giving you some tech tips. The first one is to see captions on this webinar. You'll need to click on the CC icon and then click on the show subtitles. You can change the font size in the subtitle setting. Sorry, looks like I skipped ahead. So you can change the font size in the subtitle setting. And we're going to use the chat feature for technical issues and panels only. If you have a question, and we will be doing Q&A towards the end of the presentation, please use the Q&A icon to ask questions. And then after, if we don't get through all the questions, Jen has graciously offered to review them and provide answers that we'll be posting when we post the webinar. So even if you think we aren't going to get to the questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. If you've joined by computer, the presentation should be in side-by-side mode. Slides are on the left and the panelists on the right in gallery view. You can change the size of your side-by-side view by hovering between the two screens and moving the gray bar to adjust to your desired size. If you've joined by mobile device, your view may be slightly different and you may have to scroll between the views to get to the desired one. Just a disclaimer that this is put on by HLAA, but we do not endorse any products featured in the webinar. HLAA is providing an educational opportunity to learn about new products and opportunities and how they could benefit people with hearing loss. And as I mentioned today, our presenter today is Jen Shoemaker. And now I'm gonna go ahead and turn the presentation over to her. So here you go, Jen.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Okay, there we go. And just to do a sanity check, everyone can see this first slide on my screen, hopefully. Yes?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, good. No worries. No worries. So yes, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and pleasure to get to talk to you all. I am an audiologist. My name is Jen Shoemaker. I worked for ReSound now for nearly 9 years. And usually I spend my days communicating with other audiologists. So it's really, really nice to actually get to talk to some patients and people who actually get to use our hearing aids and hopefully benefit from them. Or perhaps you're just here to learn a little bit more about hearing aids. We are going to talk a lot about listening specifically to speech and noise. So I'm hoping you'll learn a little bit about why that's so difficult, especially with a hearing loss. You'll learn a little bit about how hearing aids try to help with that type of situation, with the type of technology that's inside. And then, might as well move to our agenda. Towards the end, we'll get a little bit specific about ReSound's newest hearing aid called OMNIA. This is a hearing aid we're really especially excited about because we've seen some really fantastic results specifically tied to speech and noise understanding. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you all, and then also some of the other technology that works with OMNIA that can really help boost those speech and noise situations. So thanks again for joining. Now, before we start, I do want to give a little bit of a preface that we are talking about one specific hearing aid today, That's what we call a receiver in the ear hearing aid. So you can see the picture of that there on the left. And then we'll also be talking about this little black microphone here in the circle, which connects to the hearing aids, and that can also be really helpful in those speech and noise situations. Now, ReSound makes all kinds of different types of hearing aids, and for people with different types of hearing loss. So I just want to make you aware, really, I'm spending a lot of time today talking just about these receiver in the ear hearing aids and the connected remote mic that comes with it, and mostly referring to people with kind of your sloping moderate hearing loss that we typically see as you tend to age. Maybe you have some damage to your hearing from noise exposure, just so you're aware of that. So I mean, I'm making some of those generalizations. So we'll jump into it. As you can see, I've got a picture here. We have a gentleman up at the bar trying to order a drink from the bartender. I like to use this example because for anyone who's been in a similar situation, you can easily imagine how difficult it is to hear with or without hearing aids, but specifically without hearing aids. So we've got this nice bar that's a huge open space, very trendy, low light, nice ambiance, but it's an absolute nightmare when you have a hearing loss and you're trying to understand what someone is saying. I'm sure there's a lot of echoes going on in here. There's probably some music playing in the background. We've got a lot of different conversations going on all around this gentleman standing at the bar. So if this man has a hearing loss and is trying to even just have a simple conversation with the bartender, I can imagine it's very difficult. And for any of you struggling with hearing loss, you can probably imagine too how difficult of a situation this can be. So here are some of the reasons why we actually see some of those difficulties when you have a hearing loss. Any kind of noisy environment like this with low lighting and a lot of different background sounds and people talking, that's difficult for anyone, even those with typical hearing. But what happens when you have hearing loss is that there's all kinds of roadblocks that get put into place to really make it a lot worse. So the first issue that hearing loss causes in this type of situation is that speech is no longer as audible as it would be with typical hearing. So what happens usually is you start to miss pieces of words. And most of the time, the words that you're missing are those consonant sounds. They're a little bit softer, they're a little higher in frequency. So typically you can catch some of the words that are being said, and you, as an adult, you're a very smart person. You have a lot of experience with language. And so your brain is actually really good about filling in the missing gaps that you're not hearing. But what happens when your brain has to do that is it has to use a lot more resources in order to keep constantly guessing. So as someone is talking and saying sentence after sentence, your brain is catching, but it really has to work really hard to keep up. And at any point, let's say your concentration breaks, maybe someone else starts talking around you, or there's a loud noise, someone drops a glass and it kind of startles you. Any kind of break in your attention to the person talking that you're trying to understand amongst all that noise, you really can get left far behind. So it's this very precarious kind of guessing game for your brain. And it really does require a lot more resources from your brain to keep up. Now, the noise itself is also a problem. Typically, in most environments, when you've got a lot of surrounding noise, it tends to be pretty loud. It tends to be lower in frequency. And what happens is a lot of those lower frequency sounds mask more of the high frequency sounds. And unfortunately, high frequency sounds are, first of all, the ones that you're typically missing more of when you have a hearing loss. And those are also those same consonant sounds that give a lot of understanding to speech, a lot of the meaning to words. So the noise itself is interfering and kind of covering up or masking a lot of the sounds that you're already having a hard time hearing because of the hearing loss. So it's almost like this double whammy of the noise coming in and interfering with that. Last but not least, we have what we in the audiology biz like to call reduced binaural cues. So you have two ears for a reason. By having two ears and the physical space in between caused by your head, what that does is it actually causes sounds entering into each ear to be just a little bit different from one another. That's actually great, because what happens is your brain uses those teeny tiny little differences to help you hear in these more difficult, noisy situations. So for instance, those teeny little differences between the ears help you locate where sounds are coming from. So that way you can actually turn your head towards the direction that you're wanting to hear. It also helps kind of turn down the volume of the surrounding background noise by itself, because you've got that noise kind of coming into each ear, and it's almost like your brain, your auditory system can self-calibrate. It knows that it's noise, and it will kind of just turn the noise down a little bit, make it so that you don't pay so much attention to it. But with hearing loss, it makes it much harder for your brain to take advantage of those different cues. So binaural, meaning both ears working together, those cues that help clue your brain in to locating a sound, kind of self-calibrating that noise, those things can really be not so much damaged, but it's just that your brain isn't able to take advantage of those with the hearing loss. And so that too can really make it difficult to understand a noise. So if you've ever wondered, why is it so hard to understand speech in these types of environments? Now you know. There's actually so many things going and working against you. You work so hard when you have a hearing loss to even be able to keep up with conversation. And what worries, me as an audiologist, or even as someone who has loved ones with hearing loss, I've watched this happen with my own eyes, where, if you're not using hearing aids, or you're struggling with hearing aids, and you encounter these types of big group situations with lots of noise and lots of people, it's not uncommon for those with hearing loss who are really struggling to just kind of isolate. Maybe you have to start walking up to them to have a conversation. They won't be proactive and participate any longer because it's just too hard, maybe too embarrassing to keep making mistakes and not understand what's going on. And then it may get to a point where they just stop participating altogether. They just don't go. And that's really something that we don't want to see, because as human beings, the number one thing that keeps us healthy in older age is remaining social and keeping up those social connections. So it really is vital, not just for hearing, but also just your overall health. We want to keep that social connection. So really solving this issue of hearing, speech, and noise is really, really important to us in the hearing aid world. So I know for me, as an audiologist, I'm ready for you to get your hearing aids on. We could talk a little bit here about what do hearing aids actually do to help you hear speech and noise. For those of you who wear hearing aids, you can probably say to me that speech and noise is still not easy. It's still tough. But hopefully you would agree that at least it's helpful in this situation. Sometimes with hearing aids, especially when you're a new user, you put them on and it feels like everything is just louder. But the hearing aids are actually more sophisticated than that. And they are doing specific things and using specific pieces of technology to try and specifically help you hear speech better amongst a lot of background noise. And even though it's not perfect, we do tend to see, for the most part, people who wear hearing aids feel pretty satisfied with them. So in this case, this is a survey that goes out every few years, and this one was done in the UK. So we have over 700 hearing aid users. So these are people who have worn hearing aids and are at least somewhat used to them at this point. And 2 out of 3 people on this survey said, yeah, they're satisfied. They're at least somewhat satisfied to very satisfied with the way their hearing aids help in noise and in large group conversations. Those are probably 2 of the toughest situations that you can encounter. 1 out of every 2, so about half of them, also felt like the hearing aids directly made a positive impact in their social life and then helping them participate in group activities better. Now, of course, we'd love to see 2 out of 2 people, 100% say that that's the case. But at least we're seeing half of people say, yeah, like I can notice a direct impact from the hearing aids in a positive way on those things. So we still have a ways to go. We want everyone to feel like it's helping make a positive impact. But it's certainly better than just trying to struggle through those situations without hearing aids. So we're going to talk a little bit about how hearing aids work. So bear with me. I'll try to make this technology part as easy as possible. This is a lady wearing one of our receiver in the ear hearing aids. And you'll see that at the very top of her ear, kind of where the hair is covering, is actually where the microphones of the hearing aids are. And the microphones are really the secret to helping with speech and noise. So let's get inspired by nature a little bit. I've got a picture of a jackrabbit here, and you can imagine with these huge, beautiful ears of his, it's almost like he's got his own set of microphones on his ear. So when we talk about microphones and hearing aids, we call them directional microphones because it's literally almost like these two big rabbit ears that help kind of zero in on what you want to hear. And just like this jackrabbit, his ears and his face, he's kind of pointed in one direction. We can assume that he's probably listening for a sound in that general area, while those huge ears and kind of the big back of them is almost acts like a shield that blocks out everything behind him that he doesn't want to pay attention to. And really, we use hearing aids, these directional microphones and hearing aids to almost recreate that same effect. So if we take a picture of a hearing aid here, and this is the hearing aid from the back, this little gray part with a dome on the end, that's what actually goes and sits inside your ear. That's the loudspeaker that plays the sound. But before it can play any sound, it first has to collect all the sounds happening in the environment so that then the software inside the hearing aid can process it, kind of amplify it appropriately for your specific hearing abilities, and then it sends it through the loudspeaker. So when we talk about the microphones, that's like the first piece of the puzzle. And you'll see here, we have a front microphone and a back microphone. We actually use typically 2 hearing aid microphones on each device. What that does is we actually have now this physical space between both microphones. Similar to your head and how we have 2 ears and it kind of creates slightly different sound cues between, it's really a similar concept. Any kind of sound coming into the microphones will go into both microphones, but that physical space is going to create a slight difference between the sounds. Then we can use the software inside the hearing aid to also kind of manipulate those differences, and we can actually cancel out sounds coming from a certain direction while focusing in on sounds coming from another. So we actually use that to kind of manipulate the sound a little bit so that you're actually getting more incoming sound from certain directions and blocking out sound from elsewhere. So for a sound coming from the front, you can probably tell just by my hand movements that it's typically sounds coming from the front that we want to focus on. So usually human behavior dictates when we're talking to one another that when we are talking to somebody, we usually are looking at them. So the hearing aid microphones kind of take that knowledge of human listening behavior and focus in on the front. And then you have a sound coming from behind or even kind of to the sides of your head. And the hearing aid microphones can actually cancel those out, or at least not amplify them, not send them into the system to be amplified for you to hear. So all hearing aid companies have this technology, and it's been around for a very long time. We've all been using it for a long time. So one thing I want to point out for ReSound specifically, us as a company, is that we really truly believe in trying to work with your natural hearing abilities and not against. Now that seems to make like total, probably logical sense, but the problem is that a lot of what hearing aids do to help you hear better actually work kind of against what your typical hearing looks like, because we have to compensate for the hearing loss. So it's our job with a hearing aid to actually manipulate the sounds around you to make them more audible and easier for you to hear and within your range of hearing. But by doing that, we can actually make sounds kind of unnatural. They're being processed. It's like, you know, if you're listening to someone come through a loudspeaker and they're holding their microphone, sometimes it doesn't sound quite right. It's because the sound is being processed to make it more audible. So we really believe as a company that we want to do as much as we can as possible to make the sound kind of work with the way our auditory system would typically work with the sound, and not over processing things to the point where maybe they become unnatural sounding, or kind of making your auditory system and your brain work harder than it needs to be. So I'm going to get a little bit more into detail about how the newest version of these directional microphones work, and how it's specific to our company, and kind of why we're seeing, why we think we're seeing some of these speech in noise results that we are, where people are doing really, really well with our newest hearing aid. So let's say we've got this woman in the center celebrating her birthday, and she's going to be our hearing aid wearer. And of course, she's got family and friends all around her, including people behind her. So if she's wearing hearing aids in this situation, we could kind of imagine there's a couple of different ways that we could approach this from an amplification perspective. We could put hearing aids on her and kind of make everything around her equally loud. In that case, we don't have to worry about her missing out on anyone talking behind her or to her side. But for anyone who's worn hearing aids in noise, what do hearing aids do? They turn the volume up, right? So not only are we going to be amplifying anyone talking that she might want to listen to, but it's going to be amplifying everything. And that's just going to be really overwhelming and too loud. And all that noise is really going to cover up a lot of what she may want to hear. So it's probably definitely not the best strategy for this situation. What most hearing aids will do is instead kind of reduce that overall surrounding amplification. You can see my little triangle here. It's like a little laser pointer. So if we imagine that our birthday girl here is wanting to understand this friend on the left in the peach jacket, the hearing aid can use those directional microphones to kind of cut out any sound going on behind her and really just focus on the one person. So that's super helpful in terms of understanding one person. But what about if someone behind her starts talking? What about the little girl starts singing happy birthday, or wants to ask her a question, or a friend to her side, or someone new comes walking into the room? Believe it or not, even though we typically, when we're talking in kind of these multi-person groups, most of the time we're looking at somebody when we want to talk to them. But up to 30% of the time, we actually don't even want to listen to who's directly in front of us. We actually are kind of wanting to also pay attention to things going on behind us. So with this type of strategy, where we have these very directional microphones, you can actually lose out on a lot of sound going on around, which can cause you to then lose out on what you may want to hear. So at ReSound, we actually do a hybrid approach. We have one ear in that directional mode. So one hearing aid keeps in directional mode. So that way you can kind of focus in on someone to your front. But then it also keeps the other hearing aid on the other ear in more of that all around mode, so that you still have some awareness of what's going on around you. That sounds kind of strange, but what happens is those sounds coming in from both sides of both ears kind of come together in the brain as one cohesive picture. So actually, believe it or not, it works. So let's talk a little bit about OMNIA, which is our newest hearing aid. The reason we're really excited about OMNIA is that, like I had mentioned before, we're seeing really fantastic results when we actually put people with hearing loss, fit them with the hearing aids, and then we do lots of testing. So before and during and even after we release a new hearing aid, we like to do lots of testing, even just to get an idea of how well do the newest version of the different features we build and the technology in the hearing aids, how does that actually help? So there's two things that we updated in our directional microphones in OMNIA specifically that we think are leading to those really good scores that we're seeing for people. So the first thing would be, in this situation, let's say you're wearing the hearing aids. This is your left ear with the L, your right ear on the right with the R, and then you have a friend sitting in front of you talking to you. If we start to add in a little bit of noise, what our hearing aids are going to do is that hybrid microphone approach. It's going to keep all around in one ear and then a directional pointing towards your friend in front of you. Now, what we've done to kind of update our hearing aids in this iteration is that all around mode, because of the physical, you have a head, your head creates what we call a shadow. So even when we're in that all around mode, you still miss out a little bit because of the physical, your head imposes a shadow, essentially. So you're still always going to miss out a little bit behind you. But now we're able to actually stream sound between the two hearing aids using wireless technology, and it helps fill in that gap. So that's one thing we think is healthy, because it's actually giving you better awareness behind you than we ever have had before. Now, let's say the situation changes slightly. Now we've added in more noise. We've got not just traffic noise behind this person on the right, but now we've also got some construction noise, some machine noise, and then on the left, we have this fan running on, in the background. So these are all sources of background noise that would definitely interfere with trying to understand someone talking to you. In this situation, you can see we have more noise on the right side of this person's head than the left. So the hearing aids can actually manipulate the sound a little bit, where both of the hearing aids are in that direction mode. So they're both pointing towards the friend to cut out as much noise as possible. But because the noise is higher on the right side of the person than the left, the hearing aids actually can recognize that. And what will happen is less of the sound from the right hearing aid will enter into the system, the software that the hearing aids use to process. So then once all that sound is amplified and sent through the loudspeaker and your brain kind of captured it all, you're actually hearing more of what's going on the left than you are from the right. So it's like we're letting in even less sound than we would with a normal directional microphone, if that makes sense. And because, again, your brain hears this all as one cohesive picture, it doesn't sound necessarily unnatural. It's able to take advantage of the fact that the left side is a little less noisy. And then because it is noise, we've got those directional microphones working to kind of reduce the noise from that as well, so that you hear a little bit less noise overall. And then we're also emphasizing the person talking to you in the front, because we know that's really what you want to listen to in the situation and not all of this machine noise going on around you. So these are two kind of ways that our technology is advanced, and then the newest iteration of it in our OMNIA hearing aids. So this speech test I mentioned, where we're seeing really nice results with speech understanding. We had 15 people with hearing loss who are typical hearing aid users. We fit them with ReSound OMNIA. And then we have them sit in a sound booth and do speech and noise testing, which is just as fun as it sounds. Essentially, we have background noise running constantly, and it's at a pretty loud level. It's definitely meant to interfere and make this test hard. And then what we do is we play sentences in this noise. And as people repeat the sentences back, the more words they get correct, the softer we actually make the volume of the speech. So we adjust the volume of the speech up and down as people get things correct or incorrect, because we want to find that point where we want the noise to interfere and kind of make it so that it's not too easy of a test. It's a really nice way to test the hearing aid. Like, how well is it actually blocking out background noise? Because the softer we can make the volume of the speech, that tells us that the hearing aid is doing a better job of blocking out the noise. So with our previous hearing aids, this is just the generation before OMNIA. If we say that our noise level was here, 70 dB, which is pretty loud. That's like about the volume of someone talking at like a loud conversational level. With our older hearing aids, people were able to understand the speech a little bit less than the noise, but they still needed a pretty loud volume to understand. With OMNIA, the volume of the speech was able to go down much lower, and that's for everybody on average. So that's definitely impressive as well. It's not that we just had a couple of people who did really well and everyone else did similarly. Every single one of those 15 people had a pretty significant reduction in the volume for speech. So what that tells us is that with OMNIA, compared to just our previous generation, we could turn the volume of speech down by less than half. people were able to understand the same amount of words, which is really, really something. That ends up being a 1.5, that ends up being 1.5 times more understanding, better score, better speech understanding in the same amount of noise, just because of those kind of updates that we made to the directional microphones, which is awesome. For anyone, any little improvement in those kinds of speech and noise environments is huge. So that's really, really something. Now, I know we've already run out of time. So this just kind of goes through those things that we mentioned that make speech and noise so difficult and why OMNIA helps you with that. So in terms of reduced audibility of speech, the hearing aids make speech louder. Extra cognitive resources, because you're hearing better, you don't have to catch up and guess as much. So that helps free up your brain to do other things and not feel so exhausted after these kinds of situations. We prevent some of the noise from being amplified by using directional microphones. And then we also help preserve some of those binaural cues. So the hearing aids can actually manipulate, and with that wireless streaming that goes back and forth, also help in that case as well. I know we're pretty much out of time. I just have really one more short slide. This is what's called the ReSound multi-mic. This is that little remote microphone I mentioned before. This is really the best way to improve speech and noise for any hearing aid. Most companies have a proprietary type of microphone that works. So this just happens to be our version. But essentially, if we have this gentleman here in the car, he's wearing hearing aids. Let's say this is his adult daughter. She wears the multi-mic on her lapel. And then her voice goes into that microphone and directly streams using Bluetooth or wireless technology right into his hearing aids. So this is really an amazing way to cut out on background noise, because the microphone is right next to the mouth of the daughter who he wants to hear. And so by reducing that space and having her voice go right in there and then just streaming it into the hearing aids, you can cut out on so much background noise. When we do that, we see not just a 1.5 times increase in speech understanding, we actually see a 5 times better than speech understanding. And this is even with older technology. This isn't even a current study that we've done with OMNIA. This is just in general. So for any of you who have hearing aids, are considering hearing aids, please talk to your audiologist about using, we call it a spouse mic, a remote mic, this kind of assistive listening device that can help stream someone's voice directly into your hearing aids. It is by far the best way to improve those speech and noise situations. Okay, thank you for hanging in there with me. We're only 2 minutes over, but I'm more than happy to stick around and answer some questions if you all.
I don't know that we have the ability to do questions, but we did get some questions in the Q&A. So great. I will send those to you, and then we'll send back answers when we post the webinar, which we'll be posting on our website. We can post the questions and the answers on there with that as well. And thank you so much for presenting today with us. Yes. We really appreciate it. Thank you also to our wonderful captioner, Lisa. The webinar will be posted to the HLAA website, hearingloss.org, in probably a couple of weeks with the holidays and everything. It'll probably be kind of towards the beginning of the new year, but we'll include the questions in there. And thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much for having me. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.